Welcome to Playful Beginnings, a podcast about the magic of play therapy for therapists, students, and anyone interested. In our podcast, we'll explore the deeper understanding of play therapy and the skills we use when working with children.
We hope to help you understand the why behind what we do and how it helps kids heal and grow. I'm Dr. Kristie Opiola, a working play therapist and university professor in North Carolina.
I'm Dr. Maggie Parker, a play therapist and professor in DC. Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So we are so excited and so lucky to have a guest with us today, Dr. Elisabeth Rice. Dr. Rice is an associate professor at the Graduate School of Education and Human Development at George Washington University. She is the co-creator and co-host of the podcast On Her Side. She also is a co-creator of a really amazing research video on autistic girls and friendship. She has recently published a meta-ethnography. I can't say it. Ethnography. There we go. It's a tough one on friendship in autistic girls. She has published over 15 research articles. She is an accomplished researcher and educator at GW, a robust agenda exploring inclusive education and supervision and supportive systems within the school system for children with differing abilities. And so we are so very lucky to have her on the podcast talking about autism and how it can show up and how she approaches her work as a special education and disability studies educator. So welcome, Dr. Rice.
Thank you. What a nice introduction. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here with you both. I love your podcast. So this is exciting for me.
I like yours. So it's really kind of fun. There's been a couple podcasts coming out of G-Shed, so that's kind of fun. But so we were kind of talking off air about your approach and working with children within the school systems and how you teach other educators. And so I was wondering if you could share a little bit about that, because there's a lot of similarities between what you do and what we do.
I know. We're one floor away and we never knew it.
I know.
But sure. Well, I was trained as a special education teacher. So long time ago. And right in DC, actually, in a program called the Rose School, which was an interdisciplinary program that had psychology interns and social work interns and teaching interns. And we all were working with kids with emotional and behavioral problems. And that was an elementary school setting. And that's where I first got my eyes opened to all the wonderful things and differences that kids have in life. So after doing that, which was, by the way, the hardest thing I'd ever done in my life, and I used to run into the back room and shove M&Ms in my mouth and then come back out and say, let's talk about math today. So as a special ed teacher and really talking about a different kind of philosophy. And that's why I'm so excited about your podcast, because you're talking about relationships. And I don't think everybody thinks about that sometimes when they think about teaching or special education. But we believe in our program, in fact, we have a set of credo that we sort of study about this philosophy of undergirding human relationships. And teachers are some of the most important people to form relationships with their students. And we talk about putting money in the bank. You have to have money in the bank with every student before you're asking them to do something, right? It's really building that connection is so important. So there's a research agenda about teacher-student relationships. And a lot of people, I think, in the classroom know that that's important. We don't talk about it enough. So that's why I'm here and why I'm excited about what you all are doing too.
Yeah. No, I think it's so fun. And it is, I think the more I've been at GW and the more I've kind of explored what it is that we do, is there's so many similarities and we need to all work together. And so often we're so separated. And really, if we can kind of find a way to have these conversations, I think all it does is benefit. But so right now we're doing a series on autism or Autism Spectrum Disorder. And so I was kind of curious, both from your research and your experience, what are some things that you're noticing in the classroom that maybe wouldn't necessarily be coming up or I feel like there's this idea of these stereotypical behaviors, but that's not always how it shows up. And so I was kind of curious if you could explore some of that with us.
Sure, I'm very passionate. You know, sometimes when you get those ideas, and just it's all coming in your head at one time. So I'll try to be organized. So ask me questions if I start going woo off on a tangent. Well, I think one of my favorite quotes about autism is, I think it was Dr. Stephen Shore, and he was saying, if you met one person with autism, you've met one person with
Yeah.
autism.
Yeah.
And we really try in our brains to make these patterns and these, it's always this or it's always that. And one of the things I've learned mostly from practice and also being a parent is that everyone is different, right? Every single person has different strengths. And we're programmed to see the negatives and the differences. And it takes a lot of effort to then see the strengths of every person. So autism, that was a new area for me. And when I first started teaching, I don't know if we really even called it autism, right? And changing definitions over time. Really, we're understanding more and more. And, you know, one of the things I've learned recently, there was a 2025 article from Princeton that just sort of came out and said, you know, there's 230 plus different genes involved in autism. And
Wow.
so it's just another reminder that yeah, everything that we're dealing with behavior, it comes from a different place. And you have
Mhm.
to know the individual. So I think in answer to your question, that's sort of the one big thing that I've noticed is some people have kids have sensory issues, right? Lights. And I think you talked about that on a previous podcast, but sometimes it's repetitive behaviors. Sometimes it's having thoughts that can't come out, that don't come out. Sometimes it's impulsivity. Sometimes it's anxiety. Sometimes you can hurt yourself, be self-injurious. My passion recently is about girls, and girls with disabilities is sort of that main area. So we did a study recently about autistic girls, and I have a doctoral student who's on the spectrum, and she is part of this project, as well as an autistic man who is an assistant professor. And so their perspectives have been really, really helpful. And I think it's, you know, hearing from the girls themselves has been really powerful. And we don't find them in schools very often. In fact, they're underidentified. And it used to be that 8 to 1. There are 8 boys on the autism spectrum compared to 1 girl. I think what we're learning is it just looks different. And we're so programmed to see only one way
Mhm.
that we're missing a lot of girls.
Yeah. What are you noticing in differences in presentation? Like, what are things that you've identified?
Well, sort of in older girls, maybe, and I'd say late elementary school. A lot of times we don't notice that girls are having social problems, but that's actually research based. Teachers and most professionals don't really recognize all the subtle things that are going on in girl groups. But
Mhm.
anyway, in this time period, we see girls standing maybe near a group,
Mhm.
and we think they're in the group.
Right.
But not necessarily. The girls themselves have said as teenagers they reflect back and say, I just wasn't interested in what they were talking about, but I stood there and, you know, I worked so hard on what the research calls masking, right? Hiding what I really am like in order to try to look like I fit in. And girls do that a little bit better than boys in a younger age. And then after a certain time, that becomes really exhausting
Mhm.
and really, you know, leads to some troubles with anxiety and a lot of, you know, self-doubt. And so I think that's probably one of the things that stood out to me the most from listening to these girls was about masking and how that it looks to everybody else you're fitting in, but you're not.
Yeah.
And bullying, really
Oh,
being the recipient of some what we would call, I guess, in the popular culture, mean girl type,
yeah.
kind of getting, and we don't really notice that. I think sometimes as adults, we don't know all that's going on.
Yeah.
Well, and I also think it's very covert, right? It's not
Yeah.
always, I mean, the one thing we know about the research on bullying is boys do overt bullying. So it's seen, it's loud, and girls do this more covert, like under channeling bullying, which is isolating. I was
Mhm.
just thinking as you were talking, Dr. Rice, about as a child-centered play therapist, I'm not always good at asking questions of clients, but I'm wondering in my intake if I need to be more inclusive of,
Mm.
right? Talk to me more about their peer group. How do they feel like they fit in? Or what do you notice when they're hanging out with their friends especially if parents have concerns or a child we're seeing may have, and in particular, a female client, right? If they are presenting with any symptomology of autism to help us better weed out this question, because I also think it's one of those internalized behaviors that they don't talk about in the moment. And so it's like an undercurrent until it's so isolating and, it shows up later as maybe more systemic problematic. I don't want to even call them problematic behaviors, but systemic behaviors that they see and then they really don't know why they don't fit in or
Right.
don't feel like they have a subset or they don't feel understood or one of those components.
Or that by inherently being themselves, that means that they can't be accepted. And so that contortion of trying to fit in, and then even when that happens, one, it's exhausting and how like painful that is. And then also then to be rejected on top of that would be really tough. And girls, I think it's definitely a little bit different and more nuanced now, even just in where we are in our world and our systems with technology and how I'm seeing this play out with she's now 9, but text groups where they just yell at each other and pick someone off of the group, but then the next day they're back in the group and this is whiplash.
I know.
This is so hard. And the anxiety. And so to think that you're having to kind of put on this persona or this mask and still have that rejection would be really isolating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And girls and the autistic girls in our study and that we pulled together, they say they want friends, right? It's not that
Yeah.
they don't want this. I think sometimes we think, oh, autism, they just don't, they just want to go over there on the side and do their thing. No, they want friends. It's just a little bit different. And another point that one of my doc students really reminded me, she said, it's so much easier for me when people ask me about my special interest and I start to connect with them that way. And that reminded me of how the little bit I know about you, what you all do, right, is really talking about entering where a child is. I don't know what do you do in that situation? Like with if you had a young autistic girl come in, maybe, or how
Well,
does that look in therapy?
yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question to even ask. Kristie was saying in the intake. Tell me a little bit more. I think, especially because it's interesting how in the playroom things come out. And I think their interest can come through without having to bring them
Mm.
in something special. And
Mhm.
how that kind of comes out in different ways is kind of cool. Or even just like I've had children that I think that were probably on the spectrum and the toys are there and they're yeah. But let me tell you all about Minecraft. We would just do all this Minecraft all through this experience. And even though we didn't have the technology to play it, it was, I learned, Kristie, you were saying you learned all the things about chess and you're like,
I love that.
yeah,
And I know nothing about chess.
I don't
And
either.
the client tried to teach me on a dry erase board. So every
Oh,
time the client changed something, he erased any of my anchors to having any understanding. And he was so sweet. I mean, he was such a great client, a great growth client for me in the sense that he finally said one day, he's like, "Can I bring in my iPad?" Which we don't allow technology in the playroom traditionally. And his mom's like, I told him he can't bring it, that technology. And I was like, it seems important to you. And he's like, it is. And I was like, oh, okay. We can try it for today. It doesn't mean it's always approved, but for today. And he brought it and he's like, oh, thank goodness, because we can play chess and you can actually be an opponent now. Because I'm going to put on where the game has assistance for you. So when you make a bad move, it's going to tell you that's not the right move. So you can change your mood to make it more appealing because it was so important to him. And
yeah.
so, but yeah. But I was
And
also thinking, I have a current client right now who is really into anime. And so we spend a lot of time, well, she spends a lot of time drawing and I spend a lot of time observing, right? And recently she's like, let's try to draw these together. So wanting more relational connection, but we in Child Center, we wait for the client to initiate that desire instead of just jumping in and taking over or like owning any part of that, that it's really their opportunities to teach us to build self-esteem, to build that self-worth. And during the session, I'm giving responses that are esteem building. You know a lot. You have this figured out. You're determined to get this. All of these components to help. Because I do think esteem is a big thing that I see in the playroom for girls in general, and especially those tweeny age girls that esteem really starts to take a hit. But then for the kiddos that I've worked with that are on the spectrum, you see it even at a greater degree sometimes.
Yeah. And it makes me wonder too, like how many of the kids that I've seen that maybe have not been diagnosed or gone under the radar, and thinking about now, I'm like kind of replaying that Rolodex of clients. I wonder if I missed this because it is, I think that even the DSM, right? We talk about it all the time. It's a set of characteristics, it's a set of symptoms or behaviors. And so if not everybody presents that way, and I think what I hear you saying too, Lisa, is we're not really looking at girls. We don't look at women in general in research. And
Yeah.
so maybe we're missing this really big piece. And as I was doing research for this kind of series, I think there's this idea that you go to the pediatrician before they're 2. And if they haven't met their milestones, then you're going to get this diagnosis. And that's not, it seems like what you're seeing, and it's being supported in that way, is there can be people who are diagnosed much later in life because their symptoms are more subtle or they're different or they're not as stereotypical.
Yeah, we're doing a study now, not to veer off of
No,
autism,
please. Yeah.
but with girls and with ADHD. And these are tween girls who are talking about friendship and the difference and the hardships that they're having. They're talking on TikTok. So we're looking at their TikToks. And they're talking about friendship issues that they're having, and based on some of their issues with ADHD, like they're forgetting to stay in contact with people. They keep interrupting their friends, right? And when I look at the research literature, we're just talking about diagnosis and how different girls with ADHD are. I know you've done a lot with that. But I think one of the great strengths of the autism community is they've demanded that they have a set of research principles. They talk about how autistic people need to be involved in all the studies. They talk about we want to do research on things that are important to us, friendship, being connected, changing the work environments. So I don't even know how I got on that tangent, but I connected to what you said.
Yeah. No, but I think that's the thing is that, and I really relate, and it's something that I'm trying to do at home a lot, is sometimes our brains are just different because for so many children that are not neurotypical, whether it be on the spectrum or ADHD, it's you're too much, you're too this, you're too, so it's everything feels overwhelming. And how all of these things can kind of be comorbid, because then you were saying too with the girls, then you've got a lot of anxiety, and then there's fear and isolation and self-doubt because there's this idea of what I'm supposed to be and it's not what I am. And so I'm kind of curious, taking that within the special education classroom and your relationship focus, how do you kind of work through that with kids? What's your approach? How do you handle those things?
Well, a little bit is how we started our podcast. I'm working with a neuropsychologist and a therapist who graduated from your program, Maggie.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Oh that.
Go Brown. Yeah,
Oh yeah.
she's graduated from your program, and so she does therapy now, and we talk about the importance of the mother-daughter relationship. So that's one of the things that we as moms and professionals feel is so important to girls. I think the other thing too is it's our tendency, like you said, it's our tendency to find things that are wrong and try to help fix. And I think we really need to, really keep that at bay and know that we're not fixing anyone. Nobody wants to be fixed. You can see who they are and help them grow to the best version of themselves they could be. And along with that, you don't know what someone's going to end up being. My colleague Adam Berman, who one of my former dissertation students who I write with now, who's autistic, said, you know what they told me? I told my mom. They told my mom that I was going to be institutionalized and I wouldn't be potty trained. And now he's a, faculty member at Central Michigan University. And so I think a lot of times we worry and we try to fix, and you just don't know what's coming around the corner. So those are sort of the things that I think about, and I really try to focus on strengths.
So honoring who they are as an individual, linking up what they're interested in and what you're teaching and how you're engaging. And yeah, instead of looking at that deficit model.
Right. And bringing in, all of us can do that. We can bring in, if we know something's important to a student, you can do that in a classroom of 20, as well as, a individual therapy session, right? You could,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that that's super important. Now, I also love what you all are talking about. That doesn't mean you just let things go wild and have
Yeah.
rules and no limits, right?
Yeah.
Because everybody feels better when they know that this is what the routine is, this is what the structure is. So we all need that, but then
Yeah.
honoring the strengths within there.
When it's even just something as having a teacher, for an example, for a math problem, using something that the kids are interested in, right? If you have 12 dungeons and 5 dragons, I mean, I don't know,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
you can bring in, and I think that even goes to a lot of what we talk about with child development with Vygotsky and scaffolding. And how are we going to make sure that these, kids feel seen and heard and valued? And you can take a class with 30 kids and try and have relationships with them. I'm not saying that teachers have an easy job by any means. That's very difficult. I can only do 2 kids at a time. So, props to anybody who can handle that. But just something like that I think could be so cool, or just having pictures on the walls, or,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. And we all work in teams. I think that's the other thing too, is you just started the podcast off with like how we're in our little silos.
Mm-hmm.
We all have our little thing, but you know what? What if the therapist, what if the school crossing guard, somebody's going to have a great relationship with
Yeah.
that student, and let's bring it in. Let's use it. Let's
Yeah.
let's not try to say, well, this is my time or this is my class and you can't
Right.
this or connect with that person.
Well, and that's like they did oh, go ahead, Kristie.
No, I was going to say, I love that. And I have a hesitation to that because we have seen, and I help support a programming at a local school, and the techs want to come, the ABA techs want to come into therapy with us. And we've trialed it, but they're so rooted in their
Mm.
ABA approach, then they're interfering with the clinical session at times. And so
Wow.
we've talked about it more of outside of the session to really lean into some education and some other components with the tech so that the in-person time, right, our face-to-face time is really geared, and in some of those conversations the techs have been adamant that what we're doing is actually counterintuitive and harmful to what they're doing. And so almost trying to correct us as the clinician. And it's like, well, the parents want both support. So we're not, we want to work with you, but we also want to work with you within the constraints of our knowledge. And we're seeing that, the relationship approach is really helpful for a lot of these students, and the stuff that you're working on shows up in session, but undirected, unprompted, other things. And so it gives them an opportunity. The way we've handled it is that, well, we're supporting you guys, right? And giving them an opportunity for the initiation, for the self-motivated practice of these skills, even though, to be honest, that's not why we're doing it. But that is showing up in the session. If I'm going to be honest, it is showing up in the session, right? With not needing all of those things for the client at that time or the student, however, whatever language we want to use here. But it is interesting, right? And I come from a hospital setting where interdisciplinary work is really important for the whole team. And it's there's all these rules and laws that make it harder for a clinician to have that same interdisciplinary work because of things HIPAA and the confidentiality piece. And I work with my students to really say there are some things we can share and we can ask permission to be more forthcoming, but it has to come from, the guardian or the parent to be able to do that so that we can do a more team approach. And then how do you advocate for your approach in a world with this population where it's maybe not the gold standard? Child-centered is not the gold standard approach to ABA therapy from an insurance perspective, and sometimes even from just the school perspective or others. And so we have to really advocate hard about how we're making a difference in what we're doing in that time on the team
Yeah.
Mm.
while your hands are kind of handcuffed behind your back or tied behind your back sometimes.
Well, you're bringing in reality, right?
Yeah.
And reality is that it's messy, and schools and they're messy places. And
Mhm.
the teacher, we have a huge teacher shortage coming, especially special ed teacher shortage. And it's never the kids. People don't leave because of the kids. people leave because adults can't behave. I mean, that's a whole other podcast.
Well, I'm really glad that you were able to come. Sorry, did I just cut you off,
Yeah.
Lisa?
No, no, thank you so much. You both so much. And yeah, anything you can think of, I will join you.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yay.
Kristie, the next time you're in town, let us
Oh,
know.
yeah,
And
yeah. My parents live in Northern Virginia, so I
Okay,
pop into
excellent.
town. We should go all get coffee and like plan a study.
That would
yeah,
be awesome. That would be
oh, I
great.
would love
Yeah.
it. Well, thank
Yes.
you so much for being here. For everyone, if you have additional questions, reach out. You can call it or contact us at info@playtherapyspace.com, Maggie or Kristie at playtherapyspace.com. So if you have questions for Lisa, let us know and we will pass those on. I see her quite often, about every other week in a meeting. And this would give us even more opportunity to work together. So thank you so much for giving us your time, Dr. Rice. We really appreciate it, and just learning about your research and what you do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
Thanks, guys.
you.
Okay. Yeah.